Hey, welcome back to Sister Brunch with me, Fanchon Cox.
And me, the show's EP, Christabel Insia-Boadi. I'm filling in for Anya, who's out being fabulous today.
Yeah, I cannot wait to be able to talk about what she's out being fabulous doing. But anyway, we miss you, sister, but also we're thrilled to have Chris here with us today. And we are back talking to you about Black women plus working in the media, entertainment, and the arts. This is our first episode that we are recording during the COVID-19 crisis, as well as so many other things happening in the world. But we just want to let you know, that's why the sound may be a little bit different, but we decided that we have to keep going because these women's voices need to be heard. Today's guest, I feel like this is one of those guests that needs no introduction. And if you don't know who she is, you have been under a rock somewhere. We've got Felicia Pride, and she creates all kinds of different content. She's been a writer on Ava DuVernay's Queen Sugar. She's developing the erotic romance feature film Deeper with Universal Pictures and Will Packer Productions. She also runs her own production company called Felix and Annie, and it focuses on Gen X projects, and we will definitely be asking her lots more about that.
She's also the brains behind the Create Daily, a popular resource that curates jobs and opportunities for underrepresented creators. And she says that she created it in 2012 to thrive professionally. And now she's adding director to her title with the online release of her short film Tender, which is gorgeous. I watched it and I'm excited to talk about that. Tender takes a look at dreams deferred, lost chances, and finding joy when you least expect it. And the soundtrack by Asha Santi is fantastic. I absolutely loved it. Felicia, welcome to Sister Brunch.
Wow, thank you so much for that wonderful intro and for this wonderful platform. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Felicia, you lead the way in that pay it forward. I love how you do that. You are so much about community. You're so much about uplifting other voices as you go along on your journey, making sure that you're always kind of giving a platform for other people. And it's just beautiful to see. What we love to start with here on Sister Brunch is your journey. You can start from birth, or even parents meeting, or you could start from what was this kind of spark for you to get into the entertainment industry?
Well, I am the daughter of Felix and Annie. That's what my production company is named after. They are both Baltimoreans. My father's from West Baltimore. My mother's from East Baltimore. And I wasn't one of those who knew I was going to be a writer since I was 5. You know what I mean? I didn't. And actually, I went to college at a local college, and didn't know what I was going to do with myself. Business sounded like I could get a job, so I was like, let me do that. And had a concentration in marketing because that seemed a little creative. But it was there that I had a professor who saw something in my writing and suggested that I minor in English. And I was like, that sounds like more money, more time. And what am I going to do with it? So I was like, nope. So I graduated and ended up getting a corporate job working in marketing. And I was quickly bored. And so I was on the internet. This was some of the earlier days of the internet. And I remember I was writing bad poetry at the time. And Def Poetry Jam had a forum. So I posted some of my poems in the Def Poetry Jam forum. And the fact that people were commenting on my work, whether they liked it or not, but it was being seen, that really opened up something in me. And so I looked for other opportunities to write. And I found an internship, even though I was working full time. It was a free internship at a community newspaper run by a black guy, Rance Huff, called Black Rain News out of Staten Island. And he would essentially let interns write, and he would publish us. So my first published piece in 2000 was a review of Mary J. Blige's No More Drama album, because I was like, I know Mary, I can write. I had no idea about music criticism, as a field, which I have so much respect for. But seeing my name, and he would mail us the print versions, and seeing my name in print, I just felt seen. I didn't know how many people were reading this newspaper. I just was like, I was hooked. And so I did a freelance entertainment journalist career for some years, and then I was like, you know what, I want to go back to school and like get better at my craft. And I was really interested in books at the time. I remember going to Barnes and Nobles and buying books on how to write books, because I was like, I want to write the great American novel. So I went to Emerson for grad school, studying writing, literature, and publishing. And after I left, I went to New York and worked in book publishing, because I still had my foot in like the practical side of things. And it was there actually where I started kind of my service to creators, to other creators. It has always been a part of me. I had a newsletter called Backlist at the time, where I would interview authors and I would interview Black publishing professionals, and like review new books. And so I carved out this niche for myself, but I was like, wait a minute, I need to be writing too. So I ended up getting my writing career off the ground and wrote 6 books. One called The Message, 100 Life Lessons from Hip Hop's Greatest Songs, which was a collection of essays about hip hop. And things were going, and I went and traveled with that book, and we did curriculum with that book, and things were going well till they weren't. You know, book publishing, I think also a couple things happened. I think books became kind of hard for me. They just take a lot out of you. I wasn't sure of myself as a writer at that time. I was getting some book deals, but I just was not sure of myself. And then things just started to dry up for me, and so I made the fatal mistake of I stopped writing. I should have got a job, which I did, and keep writing, but I just stopped writing. And I did that for about 7 years. At that time, I was running a consultancy where I was bringing my marketing degree back, doing marketing work for what started out as books, and then I expanded into films and that sort of thing, until I got to the point where I was burnt the fuck out. Like, I had this big contract, one of the biggest contracts my consultancy ever got, and 2 months later, the project was shut down. And I was like, if I'm going to be broke, I want to be broke like being creative. You know what I mean? I was in service of other creators, which is great, but I'm like, I gotta get back to me. So I remember talking to my mentor at the time, Alice Mayette, who's amazing. She's like, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to write and create for the screen. Like, I had started kind of teaching myself a little bit, or being interested in screenwriting, and she's like, well, you should move to the biggest market. And at the time, I only had one feature that I was self-trained myself to write. And it was the day before Thanksgiving. And when she said that, mind you, the whole time I was like, California's weird. People who live in California are weird. It's too far away. Even though I would come to LA, have a good time, it was still like, it's too far from my mama. And I remember going to my mama's house after talking to Alice, and I was like, Mom, I'm going to move to LA. And she was like, okay. And I was like, I'm going to move in September. And then I ended up moving that March. So that was, I was 35 years old, and I moved across country, and I've been here for 5 years now.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And I mean, doing quite well given that you only been here 5 years.
Well, thank you. You know what? I think it was a mix of like having done so much spinning of my wheels previously that I didn't really come to spin my wheels, even though the first year and a half I was working in film distribution, which was a connection of the work that I was doing, because I was essentially an impact producer. So I was doing film distribution work, and I was an exec, and then I got laid off. And it was then that, because I was on the path to being a VP and I loved my job. I was going to Sundance for free. I was like, I was, again, in service of creators. I was helping filmmakers with their distribution plans and getting their films out there. And when I got laid off, it was devastating. But then it was like, okay, you need to get back to center while you got here. And I got very serious very quickly in what I needed to do my goal was to become a full-time professional film and TV writer.
Hey, it's Fanshin, and you're listening to Sister Brunch. We'll be right back. Oh, and if you have not already, you need to follow us on Twitter. And yeah, you guessed it, we are at Sister Brunch, and we'll be right back.
Hi and welcome back to the show. I'm Christabel Incia-Boadi. Let's get back to our conversation with the director of the movie Tender, Felicia Pride. There are a lot of people who are being laid off, right? And there are a lot of people who have been in service to other people, right? And have done what you've done. And that's a really hard thing to do. Where did you find the gumption to do that?
I think I got to the point where I was like, it's either now or never. And I got to the point where I was so exhausted of running away from this gift. And that's what I also had to realize, is that I have a gift, right? And I think we run away from the gift because of the responsibility. I think we run away from the gift because of the promise and the potential of it. I think we run away from the gift because of the fear, right? So I had been running away from my God-given gift for so long that I was literally exhausted. And I was like, I'm tired. And so what I did on the practical side of things was I completely reconfigured my relationship with the work. I basically had to get back to a healthy relationship with the work because I had put so much burden on the work. Like, oh, the work got to financially support me, which it does not have to do. The work has to make me happy. Like all these things that I had put on the work and not on myself. So I was like, I had to like make up with the work, like a recourt the work, like let's go out, let's get comfy, and like really just get back to a healthy relationship, which meant that I had to prioritize it. The work became the most important thing for me, even more so than my paying my bills. And what I mean by that is the bills are going to get paid at some point.
Right.
But in order for me, I had to stay tuned to the long-term vision. So I started taking on, like in the impact world, I basically was a coordinator for a impact producer I used to hire on projects. She had this project. She was like, you don't want to run this campaign? I said, absolutely not. I was like, I want you to tell me what to do for this hourly rate that's enough to cover my bills so that I can focus on the writing. Like that is what I need. And then I also had to reposition myself publicly as a writer because I forgot, so I know a lot of people forgot that that's how I came up. Like I was journalist and author, so I had to completely let folks know again, like I'm not an exec, I'm not impact producer, I'm not all these things that I'd said I was in order not to say writer. Like I am writer. So that sort of just defining it and claiming it for myself then allowed me to do so publicly. And then I got started taking a bunch of classes, got my portfolio up. I had a career coach that works with specifically entertainment professionals. So I just got really, really serious. But it was definitely some hard days, but I knew I was getting closer and closer. You know what I mean? Like I just knew, I felt it. I was like, I am actually getting off this hamster wheel. Finally, after years.
I love this because even when I said like, oh, 5 years isn't that long, but this is true for so many Black women. Like there's so much behind that 5 years that it looks like just 5 years. But one thing that I find, and I think we have not talked about this enough on this podcast, is the balance between your craft and your skill that you love so much and knowing how to market yourself, because and we especially are, for all kinds of reasons, that's a fear we have of talking ourselves up and letting people and being really clear about who we are and what we do. And you are such a phenomenal example of that. What can we do to help Black women understand that that's an integral part of doing this work?
Well, thank you for saying that, because I I didn't think so for a long time, but it actually was my therapist who helped me work through that. My Black woman therapist, who I love, Dr. Ty, who was like, when you hide, you deny the world your brilliance, and that's selfish. And I was like, ooh. Okay, let me unpack that. Okay. And so what I had to do also, for me, perspective is everything. So I had to move away from me marketing myself, because that made me feel uncomfortable, even though I see the value in that, and towards me sharing my journey, because I realized that, wow, people actually get something from me talking about this, so that's kind of how I look at it, as also part of paying it forward is sharing the full journey. Because I think a lot of times, we see the red carpet and all of that, but how did this even, and I think sometimes even people are like, whoa, you got here fast. And I was like, no, let me kind of explain, this has been 20 years in the making as a writer, and a lot of ups and downs, but also a lot of skill building, particularly for Hollywood, how to deal with people, how to be good in a room, things like that. So I think that it sounds cliche, but we have to get over ourselves, right? Because a lot of people who are not as good as us be out here in these streets
you're the for our first guest that has a publicist, and I think that is super important for folks to know and to talk about, right? Is that you having someone rep you like that. So will you just talk a little bit about
Yeah, I
that?
want to shout out Jasu. Jasu Sims is an amazing publicist out of New York. She and I worked together on a short film, um, maybe four something years ago, and we just worked well because we match each other's hustle. Um, and so she gets me in that perspective, and I get her. She is smart. She works hard, and I see the value in a good publicist. Now, all publicists ain't built the same, you know what I mean? And it's interesting because I had talked to some publicists around really love going to South by. And it's really like, oh, well, you gotta have this going on, you gotta have that going on, you have to. So me and Jasu, just on our own, we'd be like, well, what are the angles? What can we talk about? You know what I mean? Like there's still stories that I think can be told even when there's not, this hot project that you have to have. That tells me if you need a really, really hot project that you're not that creative as a publicist.
You're not a good producer.
I'm basically just doing the work for you. You know what I mean? So, like yeah, exactly. So, that was something that I really, haven't done some publicity work, but a lot more in the marketing space. I know the value of a good publicist in order to get out. Because I also think that it's important, particularly I feel very passionate about, having worked in film distribution, that our projects need to be seen. They need to be seen. Yes. All the work that we put in to get something made, we can't just let it go. We can't just let somebody take over who doesn't care about it as much as we do. Yep. And so I'm very, 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 very big on how can we make sure that the audiences who we intended and we made this for get to see it. And so that's also why I put my money into this, because it's so important. It's important.
What you're talking about is the ability to define yourself. I think the ability to be able to take those steps so you can redefine your relationship with your work, redefine what your career looks like, requires a certain level of perspective. And that's not to say that people can't do it. I think that our listeners really need to hear that. As you're in these creative industries and you're navigating ways to tell your story, like, how did you do that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of work that I did around developing campaigns, impact campaigns for media, film, books. I did audio, podcasts, and radio shows.
And can I just pause you a second? What is an impact campaign for people who don't know?
So it's a field that's been around for a while. I mean, I think they're professionalizing it more, and essentially an impact producer is someone who comes up with strategies and campaigns in order to extend the impact of typically a social justice project, right? So one of the biggest projects I've ever worked on, which I'm so incredibly proud of to this day, is a film called Slavery by Another Name, which, if you like 13, yes, I would tell you to watch Slavery by Another Name, which is free on PBS. But I developed the entire educational curriculum for that. We went around and did teacher trainings for that film. We then also did mobile storytelling trainings. Like, it was just all this in order to extend the impact of that project. So that's essentially what impact producing is. And I never really used any of those skills on myself. You know what I mean? So Tender was the first project that I was excited about, that I didn't even think about it going into it, but just like my sort of commitment to making sure that people see our work. I was like, oh, I can kind of put these skills to the test from beginning to end from the start of the crowdfunding campaign, all the way through now. We want to turn it into a feature. So we're looking at what does that look like? What does a long-term fundraising campaign look like, is what we're tackling. And it's experiments, you know what I mean? The shit might not work, but I'm interested in also new ways and new modes of doing stuff, particularly those things that have been typically denied to us or made harder for us. So fundraising, distribution, etc. How can we be creative about financing our work and then make sure our work reach the people? So that's what I'm really interested in. And Tender has been a perfect project for that, because also just as a writer, and we talk about brand, right? Tender is my aesthetic. You know, if and I was so happy that it came out. Even my producer was like, this is so on brand for you. My 23 year old producer, Regina, who is a dynamo. She was like, and then when she said that, I was like, yeah, this is my aesthetic. Like these are the themes I'm interested in. I love music is very important to me. I want to center a Gen X woman. I want to open up our conversations about Black women's sexuality and how all the different ways that it can look in our queerness. And so that was a perfect project for me to really showcase the whole like 360.
Hey, this is Sister Brunch with Fanchon Cox and me, a special co-host, Christabel Insiabwadi. Stay tuned for more of our conversation with the writer and director, Felicia Pride.
Are back to our conversation with Felicia Pride. Your trajectory is exactly that example, I think, that we can hold up for young Black women plus to say there's a space for you, and you're going to be doing a lot of the work to carve it out. And keep doing that, because there's a space for you, and you'll start to find the other people. But and then you don't have to be pigeonholed. You're like, I am a writer. That's what people know me for. If you kind of IMDb me, that's where you see. But I know how to do impact producing, and I'm going to do that. And I know how to brand myself and market myself. I now know how to direct. I know how to distribute it. I know how to turn a short into a feature.
and also I own my own production company, you know.
I'm glad you brought that up, because especially with everything that's happening in the world, I've just been thinking a lot more about ownership. I've always thought about ownership, but with Tender, I was like, I need to own this feature. Like, that's taking a page out of Ava DuVernay's book of owning I Will Follow, and essentially, you know, self-distributing that, making enough money to be able to be an investor in your second film. So I've just been thinking a lot about ownership, and also I was talking to a friend about this. It's like not always operating in the Hollywood system. Like I want, because you have, the only thing you can control in that system is creating work, but you can't control it getting made. And so much of our work is just not made in Hollywood. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm going to work in that system to fund my lifestyle in order to be this independent artist, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. It's like, I want to be able to continue to make art creatively, because I can control the making of that, right? I can make sure that a project like a film I'm working on now called Alameda, about my mother, inspired by my mother and my sister and my niece, I can make sure that it gets made. Like, I know that's going to get made, because I'm going to do what it takes to get that movie made.
You're going to make it, right?
Tender was crowdfunded, right? So it was the community that funded that film, right? So if you don't have the money, it's like, turn to the community, and it helps when you've built some goodwill in the community. You know what I mean? Where the community is like, we see you, sis, we've seen what you've been doing, and we want to pay it back to you. And that's kind of how I felt. I felt like, wow, I was so overwhelmed by all the people who showed up for me in crowdfunding for that film. So I think it is about making something, but I also think it's about sustainability. So that's another thing that I would always talk about with filmmakers and distribution. Like, do not look at it, it's not just one film, right? You are building your ability to continue to make films. And so that's why I also think it's important, even as you go in and make something, how can I make this in a smart way? How can I distribute this in a smart way so that I can continue to make films, so I can continue to make stuff? So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And, you know, the first film that I sold, Really Love, it took me 10 years to sell that film. I just wonder what would have happened. I mean, at certain points we were thinking about trying to self-finance. I was thinking about a model of like 50, going to 50, you know, Black people with disposable income and raising 50 for 50, right? 50 people with $50,000. So I'm still thinking about plans like that, right? How does that look? What does that look like? But I just wonder, had we gone a different route, would it have taken 10 years? 10 years. Like, we don't have 10 years to wait on all these stories. We really don't.
Right.
And that was literally 10 years for someone to say this is good enough to get made. When I already knew that, you know what I mean? Like,
So how have things been for you now with COVID, and how have things shifted, and how are you kind of coping with all of it spiritually and also career wise?
well, career-wise, it's interesting. I'm on a new show. I'm on Grey's Anatomy, so I'm very grateful to be working and to be learning new, how network shows work, and then like a property that has been around forever. Like, what does that look like? So I'm very, very blessed to be working in a room, but and then I'm still working on projects. Like, interestingly enough, and I mean, this is purely anecdotal from my friends, but in terms of my writer friends, stuff is still happening. Stuff is still coming our way, development opportunities, and then also independent work that we're working on ourselves. We're trying to push those things forward. Mentally, it's been a struggle though. So that's why I had to get back into therapy, because I didn't realize how much I was suppressing racial trauma, and just keep going, moving through it till I hit a wall. And so that has definitely been difficult. And so I've been also really focusing on, as my therapist said, because she was like, storytellers, she was helping me reconnect with my purpose. She was like, storytellers help us reconnect with our humanity, and that's more important than ever. She's like, it sounds like you're struggling because you're disconnected from your humanity. Like, what are the things that you can do? And so that's was really powerful to me, and that's what I've been kind of working on, is like getting reconnected with humanity, which was like Juneteenth,
Yes.
and fellowship and all of that. But in terms of professionally, the projects are still
Amazing.
coming.
I mean,
Yeah.
so do you, if you don't mind and fully understand if you do, can you talk about how, because you said you do have a Black woman therapist?
Oh yes, her name is Dr. Ty.
Okay.
Blackgirldoctor.com. She's hosting free healing circles on racial trauma, which, yeah, so she's fantastic. She's fantastic. I mean, she helped me at a low point around 2018, when I was going through some professional bullshit. My father had just died. I was going through some relationship bullshit, and I was like, this is too much for me. God, I know it's like you say, enough on your plate, but this is way too much. And she really helped me through that. And so because I don't, it's a shorthand. I don't really need to explain a lot of things. You know what I mean? And I found her on therapy for blackgirls.com.
This is Sister Brunch with Fanchon Cox, me, and our special co-host Christabel Nsiabwadi. Stay tuned for more of our conversation with writer and director Felicia Pride.
I just want to ask about Tender. I was listening to you talk about your trajectory, and this is a bit of a turn, but was that a conversation between yourself?
It absolutely was. But I would say the aspirational parts of myself. I think these two women are much braver than I am. But it is about essentially a woman who has this tender moment, this intimate moment, an experience with her younger self, essentially, right? And how her younger self is helping her to get back to herself.
So the movie is about self-love in the truest of ways.
Self-love and intimacy, but also how that self-love can be, how we can be reminded of our need for self-love from other Black women.
Yes.
So then, and that's why I was like, it's the morning after, like they have this, I'm sure it was like some hot, wonderful sex. I think it was popping, But I was really interested in the emotional intimacy that they are able to have as quote unquote seemingly strangers, but they have so much more in common than they think, because of the age difference and class. Because I like to play with class and status and stature. But yes, you're probably one of the first to say it so directly. So
I'm interested in why you want to focus on Gen X stories specifically.
well, I think if you look at movements, right, you're younger in that part of the movement, right? And then life hits you, and you get older, and you get safe, and you get all these things. So like when we were starting hip hop, we were younger, and when baby boomers were going through the civil rights movement, they were younger. They were young people as a generation. So I think that of course life hits us, and we got to think about, wait a minute, I got these 3 kids, this tuition, I got it life just all of that. Yeah. But I was, one thing I was like, I was 39 in my first writer's room. I was, 39 as a staff writer, and that is older than typical. Yeah. And so I think that there's a lot of the conversations that I have with my friends are just different. They're just different. And I think there's just a lot of space for the conversations I have with my friends with Gen X. So yeah, that's what I really, why I focus on it, is because I think there's space for it. And I think there's still a lot of conversations that we haven't seen on screen. But I think one of the leaders for me of like that is like Mara Akil. She's like the leader. I love her work so much, of like showcasing, like Girlfriends is like the Gen X show, for one of the Gen X shows for me. Even in our like youthfulness, you know what I mean? So that's a lot of the reasons why. I just think that there's a lot of space for it.
I love that you asked that question, Chris, because we've talked a lot, especially with our writer guests, about authenticity, about, really believing in your voice. And you talked about that some too. But I also love this idea of specificity of it, that you're like, this is who I am. So yes, it's authentic, but it's also, there are some generational kind of concepts within who I am. There are identity concepts, there's intersectionality, all of those things about who I am. And that gives you so much strength to know that is your voice too, right? That is your authentic voice, is those things that are specific about you, right? That put you in a pod of people who are going to really resonate with your work. And it's not that other people, it's not accessible to others, but oh, Chris, she's amazing.
I love that, because like even Tender, the reception to Tender has been so amazing. And it just reconfirmed how hungry we are, we as Black women, Black queer women, just the gamut of just wanting to see us on screen. Like, it, but Tender really like had me feeling it in my soul. But what I realized too is like, it's just one story. It's just one. One. It's very specific to, again, my aesthetic, my experiences, and what I want to see. And that's why it's like we need so many more stories. We need so many more of us telling our stories. Like, it just really hit home for me for that reason, seeing Tender like go through the release process.
So I want to make sure that we support you in all the ways that you'd like us to, and so talk about where we can follow you. And
thank you. So if you want to watch Tender, you can do so at tendermovie.com. We have a lot of exciting news forthcoming, which I'm really, really excited about, from festivals to some other great initiatives. So if you go to tendermovie.com, you can watch the film, but you can also sign up for our mailing list and be updated on that. We also just launched on Instagram at Tender Movie, and then I'm on Instagram and on Twitter at Felicia Pride.
Wonderful. Oh, and we didn't touch on Create Daily, but real quick, tell us about that.
Yeah, the Create Daily is a service I started in 2012 for underrepresented creators, and I used to send it out every day, which blows my mind. It was one opportunity a day. Yeah, one opportunity a day. But now it's weekly, and it's a chock full of tons of opportunities, anything from funding to programs. And the goal is to curate opportunities to help us to be able to focus more on creating so that we can thrive professionally.
And you've got your IG Lives, chats.
Yeah, our IG Lives. It just came back, but so far we've talked to Numa Perrier, we've talked to Cree Summer. So I'm really excited. And they're just on my IG Live on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PT. And it's just an informal conversation called Chats with My Creative Friends.
Felicia,
Wonderful.
thank you so much.
Thank you for this. And I just want to thank you, Fanchen, for the work that you do. It is a lot of times very thankless work, but you are behind the scenes, like making big things happen. You're in front of the scenes, calling out people, supporting people. And I just really, really, really appreciate that. And like, I just want you to know that I don't see everything that you're doing, because I know you're doing so much more than I see, but that I see you. So thank you.
Thank
for that.
you.
Yes,
Oh my goodness.
I second that motion too.
Thank you so much. Onwards. That's all I have to say.
Felicia Pride, I want to thank you. Felicia Pride, writer, business owner, director, media person extraordinaire, and fantastic conversationalist. I don't want to mess that word up. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so
on
much for
Sister
having
Brunch.
me. This has been wonderful.
So that was our conversation with writer and director Felicia Pride. Go to sisterbrunch.com to find out more about her and all of her projects. And thank you for listening to Sister Brunch with our fabulous guest co-host today, Christabel Nsiabwadi, and me, Fanchen Cox.
You can follow us on Instagram at Sister Brunch Podcast to find out what's caught our attention. We're also on Twitter at Sister Brunch, on Facebook at Sister Brunch Podcast, and do not forget to subscribe and rate our show wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, that's important. Subscribe, rate it, tell folks you love it, and share it. Share it with other people.
Please, 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 please.
So that they have to stop telling us that they can't find talented people, because they're all right here.
Our show producer is Miss Brittany Turner, and we will see you next time.